Gunsmoke, 1955 to 1975, remains one of the longest-running and most iconic westerns in television history, capturing the rugged spirit of the American frontier and earning a place in the hearts of millions. Its legendary cast, led by James Arnes as Marshal Matt Dillon, brought grit, drama, and humanity to Dodge City. But beyond the dusty streets and thrilling shootouts, the real lives of these actors were often filled with struggles, heartbreak, and tragedy. In this video, we pay tribute to the stars of Gunsmoke who have sadly passed away, some after long illnesses, others under sudden or tragic circumstances. James Arnes, born on May 26, 1923, in Minneapolis, Minnesota, took on the iconic role of Marshal Matt Dillon in Gunsmoke in 1955 at the age of 32. Dillon was the embodiment of frontier justice, stoic, towering, and deeply moral, resolving conflict with measured strength rather than blind violence. For 20 years, Arnes wore the badge of Dodge City, becoming a symbol of American masculinity and order. But behind the badge was a man far more haunted than fans ever knew. Arnes's childhood was scarred by physical trauma and emotional neglect. Standing 6 feet 7 inches, he was bullied for his awkwardness and shy demeanor, often ridiculed for his lumbering gait, a result of the severe leg wounds he suffered during World War II. That injury led to a lifelong struggle with painkiller addiction, something few outside his inner circle were aware of. Arnes battled periods of depression and self-isolation, often disappearing between shoots and refusing press interviews. His professional reputation was mixed. While deeply respected by studio heads, he was notorious among some crew for his coldness and refusal to rehearse. His biggest career humiliation came in the early 60s when he attempted to launch a movie career with The Alamo, 13 Days to Glory, only to be replaced before production due to conflicts with producers and rumored on-set outbursts. Privately, Arnes's personal life was marked by disillusionment. His marriage to Virginia Chapman collapsed amid accusations of emotional abandonment. Their adopted son Craig would later struggle with drug addiction and commit suicide in 2004, an event Arnes never publicly acknowledged. He also fathered a child with another woman during a brief separation, a fact buried for decades. Arnes died of natural causes on June 3, 2011, in Los Angeles at the age of 88. At his death, his net worth was estimated at $8 million, accumulated through decades of syndication royalties, land investments in Montana, and silent stakes in production companies. Amanda Blake was born on February 20, 1929, and took on the iconic role of Miss Kitty Russell in Gunsmoke in 1955 at the age of 26. As the fiery, red-haired owner of the Long Branch Saloon, Kitty became a symbol of strength, femininity, and silent resilience in the dusty chaos of Dodge City. But while audiences adored Kitty's complex blend of sensuality and grit, few realized just how deeply Blake blurred the lines between her character and her own fractured reality. Born to a conservative banking family in Buffalo, Amanda endured a loveless childhood marked by emotional neglect and intense pressure to marry well, rather than pursue ambition. She ran away from home at 17 and reinvented herself in Hollywood, first as a contract starlet at MGM, then as a screen siren who concealed her scars behind glamour. Behind the scenes of Gunsmoke, Blake was both revered and feared. Her smoking habit was legendary, up to 3 packs a day, and she was known to lash out at crew members when shoots ran late. Co-stars whispered about her fiery temper and rumored pill use, especially during the grueling later seasons. Her greatest career misstep came in 1961, when she impulsively sold her residual rights to Gunsmoke for a flat $100,000. Sacrificing what would have been millions in syndication revenue. Her romantic life was turbulent, married 5 times. One of her husbands allegedly left after discovering her affair with a younger co-star, and she later confessed in a taped interview to choosing men who always needed fixing. She never had children, and those close to her say she feared repeating her own mother's coldness. In her final years, Amanda turned to animal advocacy with fierce devotion, yet privately battled shame and illness. She contracted HIV, allegedly through a partner she never named, and died on August 16, 1989, in Sacramento at age 60 from AIDS-related hepatitis. though the official line at the time was throat cancer. At her death, she owned a modest home, a ranch for rescued animals, and jewelry passed down from her acting days with a net worth estimated at $500,000. Milton Stone, born July 5, 1904, in Burton, Kansas, began portraying Dr. Galen Doc Adams in Gunsmoke in 1955 at age 51. Doc was a grumpy, no-nonsense physician with a soft heart buried beneath layers of sarcasm and whiskey-fueled bitterness. He became a cornerstone of Dodge City's dynamic, earning viewer affection through his loyalty to Marshal Dillon and his often gruff but heartfelt bedside manner. But Stone's real life was anything but medicinal. Raised in abject poverty after his father abandoned the family, Milburn spent his youth hustling through tent shows and snake oil pitches across Kansas. His early years were rife with instability, foster homes, and petty crime. After breaking into acting through vaudeville and regional theater, he clawed his way to Hollywood, often sleeping in his car and forging audition slips just to be seen. Though he found steady work in B-movies, Stone was repeatedly typecast and openly resented James Arnes for his privileged rise. Arnes had the backing of John Wayne. Stone had nothing but grit. Their early years on Gunsmoke were filled with icy silences and behind-the-scenes verbal altercations, particularly over billing and creative input. Stone was known to drink heavily and gamble compulsively, once losing $25,000 in a single night in Reno. His darkest scandal, however, involved a young aspiring actress who later accused him of coercive behavior in exchange for a promised part in a Western, an allegation quickly buried by CBS lawyers in 1963. His personal life was no calmer. His marriage to Jane Garrison was marked by infidelity, and they quietly separated for years before divorcing. Stone suffered a heart attack on set in 1971, but returned to filming just months later under studio pressure. He died of another heart attack on June 12, 1980, in La Jolla, California, at age 75. At the time of his death, his estate was valued at around $2 million, much of it tied up in modest property holdings and a residuals trust he left to a niece. Dennis Weaver, born on June 4, 1924, took on the role of Chester Good in Gunsmoke in 1955 at the age of 31. Chester, the limping, drawling deputy with unwavering loyalty to Marshal Matt Dillon, became a staple of the show's early identity. Weaver gave the character depth with a self-imposed limp and exaggerated speech that was as mocked by critics as it was adored by audiences. But behind the folksy charm, Weaver struggled with deep artistic disdain for the role, once calling Chester a joke I had to fix myself. Born into poverty in Joplin, Missouri, Weaver's childhood was shaped by the Great Depression, an alcoholic father, and a mother who was forced upon her wedding ring to buy food. Bullied in school for his soft voice and lanky frame, he developed a quiet rage that fueled his later perfectionism. His career breakthrough with Gunsmoke came after a string of rejections and years of working odd jobs to support his acting dream. Yet after 9 years, he abruptly quit the show, a move many in the cast resented. Rumors swirled of on-set tensions with James Arnes, and whispers that Weaver believed he was bigger than the show. That arrogance backfired when his next series flopped, forcing a humbling return to TV guest spots. Privately, Weaver battled control issues in his marriage to Jerry Stowell, whom he married in 1945. Though they never divorced, insiders described their union as cold and distant, especially after their son Rick's 1989 arrest for drug possession, a scandal Weaver quietly paid to suppress. Behind his eco-friendly persona was a man obsessed with legacy. Friends revealed he rewrote his own biography to downplay the failures and inflate his activism. He died on February 24, 2006, in Ridgway, Colorado, from cancer-related complications at age 81. He left behind a custom-built solar home, several undeclared land holdings, and an estate valued at $17.75 million. Though publicly mourned as a Western legend and environmental pioneer, those closest to him say Dennis Weaver never forgave Hollywood or himself for never escaping Chester Good. Ken Curtis was born on July 2, 1916. and stepped into the role of Festus Hagen on Gunsmoke in 1959 at age 43. With his gravelly voice, rambling syntax, and crooked-toothed grin, Festus was the wild-eyed deputy marshal who brought comic charm and rural wisdom to the frontier, beloved by fans for his loyalty and humor. But behind the floppy hat and twangy drawl, Ken Curtis was a far more controlled, calculating figure. Raised in the arid plains of Colorado, Curtis grew up in a strict Baptist household under a domineering father who once beat him for singing jazz. He rebelled by becoming a crooner, eventually replacing Frank Sinatra and the Tommy Dorsey Band, a success that led to jealousy and sabotage. Industry insiders claim Curtis was blacklisted briefly in the late 40s after an ugly contract dispute, during which he allegedly punched a studio executive. Though Gunsmoke revived his fame, it also rekindled his ego. Behind the scenes, Curtis was known for feuding with producers over pay and script quality, at one point refusing to shoot a scene unless the camera crew guaranteed no side angles. He alienated several cast members, especially when he demanded co-billing during the show's final seasons. Politically outspoken, Curtis campaigned aggressively for Barry Goldwater and Reagan, once making headlines for calling Vietnam War protesters traitors in a radio interview. His private life was tightly guarded, though whispers circulated of an affair with a married singer during his band days and a decades-long estrangement from a stepson who accused Curtis of emotional abuse. Curtis refused to appear in the 1987 Gunsmoke reunion over a salary dispute, a decision that created lasting resentment among fans and castmates alike. He died of a heart attack on April 28, 1991, in Fresno, California, at age 74. At the time of his death, he owned land in Colorado, an extensive antique firearms collection, and continued to receive royalties from Gunsmoke reruns, with a net worth estimated at over $5 million. Rudy Sudter, born Robbie Cecil Sudter on June 17, 1905, took on various roles in Gunsmoke starting in 1960 at the age of 55. Often cast as a bartender or grizzled local in the Long Branch Saloon, Sudter's presence lent a rustic, musical charm to the series. But while his on-screen moments were few and unremarkable, his real-life story veered into the surreal. A talented musician and early country music pioneer, Sudter helped shape the Western genre's sound, even performing with Roy Rogers and Tex Ritter. Yet the world he helped create gave him little in return. Sudter's childhood was harsh. Raised on a hardscrabble farm in British Columbia, he suffered from chronic hunger and was often beaten by his alcoholic father. Music became his escape, but also his trap. Though he wrote dozens of songs, most went uncredited or were sold for pennies to bigger names. Industry insiders whispered that he was frequently exploited, taken advantage of by producers who saw him as expendable. One of his darkest personal tragedies came in 1981, when a fire destroyed his modest home in the Nevada desert, allegedly caused by faulty wiring, but there were rumors he'd fallen asleep drunk with a cigarette in hand. Despite this, Sudter never sued, never spoke ill of others, choosing instead to live out his days in quiet dignity. He never married, and his only known romantic relationship, a long-term affair with a married woman, was kept strictly secret until his death. Friends described him as deeply kind, but emotionally scarred, tormented by the lack of recognition for his decades of creative output. Rudy Sudter passed away on June 9, 1991, in Reno, Nevada, at the age of 85. At the time of his death, his net worth was estimated at under $500,000. He died without a will, no surviving family, and no real press coverage, his life vanishing as quietly as one of his background cameos in a saloon filled with louder men. James Nuer was born on May 3, 1905, and stepped into the role of Louis Feeders in Gunsmoke in 1961 at the age of 56. Louis, the disheveled town drunk, appeared to be a background character, but beneath the comedic stumbles and slurred speech was a vessel of pain and tragedy, delivering some of the show's most unexpectedly moving moments. Louis's occasional insight into town life and justice made him unforgettable, and what made Nuer's portrayal so powerful was its eerie authenticity, because it wasn't just acting. Born into a fractured home in Cleveland, Ohio, James endured an emotionally barren childhood. His father, a failed salesman with violent tendencies, regularly beat him and his siblings. His mother, overwhelmed and depressed, vanished when he was just 10, leaving him to be passed between orphanages and foster homes. These traumas forged a reserved and anxious man whose only escape was in voices, first on stage and then in radio. His radio work gave way to TV, but his transition was marred by a growing dependency on alcohol. By the time he joined Gunsmoke, Nuer was already considered a liability in the industry. His alcoholism became so notorious that scripts were rewritten around his disappearances. Once, he vanished from the set for nearly a week and was discovered sleeping in a derelict car in Skid Row. Behind the scenes, he clashed with directors, often showing up late, smelling of bourbon, and lashing out at crew members. He had no wife or children, but there were whispers of short-lived affairs, including one with a young costumer who later alleged emotional abuse. His biggest professional disgrace came when he was blackballed from a prominent Western series in the late 1960s after a drunken confrontation with the show's producer turned physical. His final years were quiet but grim, haunted by cirrhosis, financial strain, and isolation. James Nuer died on June 8, 1979, in Los Angeles at the age of 74, succumbing to liver disease in a one-bedroom apartment littered with unpaid bills and dusty scripts. His net worth was estimated at under $500,000, consisting mostly of meager SAG royalties and a small pension. McHugh, born October 4, 1895, in Chicago, Illinois, stepped into Gunsmoke in 1958 at the age of 63, portraying Joe the waiter and other nameless barflies across 71 episodes until 1966. On screen, McHugh was a ghost in plain sight, always present, rarely heard, his expressions doing the talking as he silently navigated the chaos of Dodge City. His presence lent a strange realism to the show, grounding scenes with a sense of continuity that few background players could achieve. But behind his unassuming gaze was a life lived in the margins. Born into poverty on Chicago's South Side, McHugh was the son of an alcoholic janitor and a laundress who died when he was 10. Shuffled through orphanages and later reform school, he learned early how to blend into the background to avoid punishment. His entry into Hollywood was accidental. He followed a friend to a casting call in the 1920s and was offered $3 to stand in a crowd scene. Over the next 4 decades, McHugh racked up over 240 screen credits, most uncredited, often cast as a drunk, a gambler, or a body lying face down. He worked 14-hour days for scraps, often sleeping in rented rooms or on studio lots. Privately, he battled a gambling addiction that kept him in financial limbo, with a trail of IOUs scattered across Los Angeles poker dens. He had no children, no lasting relationships, and his closest companion was a stray dog he reportedly snuck onto the Gunsmoke set daily. Though never caught in public scandal, those who knew him whispered of bar brawls and disappearances during weekend binges. He died of unknown causes on April 10, 1966, in a modest Los Angeles apartment, alone at the age of 70. His estate, largely consisting of rented furniture and a dusty scrapbook of yellowed call sheets, was valued at under $500,000. For all his screen time, McHugh never got a line memorable enough to quote. His legacy was fading into the background, just as he had always done in life. Cactus Mack, born Taylor Curtis McPeters on August 8, 1899, began appearing on Gunsmoke in 1957 at the age of 58, portraying a variety of dusty townsfolk with the kind of ease only a true cowboy could deliver. He wasn't just acting, Cactus was the West. With over 280 film and television credits, he was Hollywood's go-to man for authentic grit, yet he rarely made more than union scale. Born in Weed, New Mexico, to a family of poor ranchers, Mack lived through brutal winters and cattle rustler raids. His cousin, Glenn Strange, would become the Frankenstein monster. Mack took the longer route, playing guitar and fiddle in traveling rodeo bands before settling in Los Angeles. What most people didn't know was that behind Mack's genial, aw-shucks demeanor was a man broken by the industry's indifference, injured during one of his last Gunsmoke appearances. He fell from a bar stool and fractured his pelvis. He continued working through pain, even collapsing on the set of The Ugly American in 1962 while filming with Marlon Brando. A producer later admitted Mack's contract was so underwritten, he wasn't insured for that shoot. Though he avoided scandal, his personal life bore scars. He'd been married twice and quietly supported a third child from an extramarital affair in the 1940s, something never made public during his lifetime. Known to drink heavily after gigs, he often played violin alone in his Hollywood apartment late into the night. Yet he was also deeply involved in charity, donating time and money to the Red Cross and underfunded boys' clubs in the San Fernando Valley. On April 17, 1962, Cactus Mack died of a heart attack on set at 62. His passing barely made the papers. His estate included a weathered acoustic guitar, a faded saddlebag full of scripts, and a collection of photos with forgotten cowboys. At death, his net worth was under $1 million, barely enough to cover funeral costs. But in every saloon scene and dusty street corner, his shadow lingers, a working man's legend buried beneath the boots of fame. Ted Jordan, born Edgar Harrison Friedman Jr. on May 23, 1924, began portraying Nathan Burke on Gunsmoke in 1961 at the age of 37. As Dodge City's freight agent, his character was never at the center of drama, but always in the frame, steady, silent, ever present. Yet Jordan's real life was anything but steady. Behind the facade of the loyal townsman was a man entangled in some of Hollywood's most provocative whispers. He was briefly married to burlesque queen Lily St. Cyr, whose striptease acts scandalized post-war America. Their union was tempestuous and short-lived, allegedly ending after violent arguments and public fights. But Jordan's most controversial moment came in his self-published memoir, where he boldly claimed that Marilyn Monroe became pregnant by him during a secret affair in the late 1940s, and that she later aborted the child. The explosive claim was widely dismissed as opportunistic fiction, but it nonetheless made headlines in tabloids and whispered circles of Tinseltown. Born into a conservative Ohio household, Jordan grew up in the shadow of a domineering father and emotionally distant mother, escaping into cinema and later into the fringes of the film industry. Despite his long tenure on Gunsmoke, his career never broke out. He was typecast, pigeonholed into minor cowboy roles. Off-camera, he developed a reputation as difficult and cold, reportedly looking down on younger, rising actors and feuding with Gunsmoke production assistants over script changes. He never had children, and while he remarried later in life, that too ended in quiet divorce. Health issues plagued his final years, including a long, undisclosed battle with emphysema. Ted Jordan died on March 30th, 2005, in Palm Desert, California, at the age of 80. He left behind a small estate worth an estimated $1.5 million, mostly in real estate and savings. No heirs, no legacy other than a scandalous footnote and 129 steady appearances in a dusty western town that outlived him. Howard Culver, born on June 4, 1918, assumed the role of Howie Uzzle in Gunsmoke in 1955 at the age of 37. As Dodge City's ever-reliable hotel clerk, Howie stood quietly in the background while chaos unfolded around him. Calm, courteous, and unfailingly observant, Culver's portrayal of Howie gave the audience a rare stillness amidst the show's relentless tension. But while his character seemed grounded and content, the man behind the counter was living a life few ever really understood. Raised in Colorado during the Dust Bowl era, Culver endured a childhood shaped by economic despair, a withdrawn mother suffering from untreated schizophrenia, and a father who disappeared when he was just 10. Mocked for his love of books and delicate appearance, Culver turned to radio as both an escape and an aspiration. His early fame came in the 1940s as the voice of Straight Arrow, a Native American hero beloved by children, though it later drew criticism from Native activists who discovered Culver was not indigenous. The controversy, hushed at the time, quietly followed him into the 50s, with several projects withdrawn due to cultural sensitivity concerns. Though never publicized, he was also blacklisted from several post-war radio roles due to suspicions of communist sympathies. fueled by his friendship with actor Howard Da Silva. His tenure on Gunsmoke brought stability, but he was known behind the scenes as too quiet, often eating alone on set, withdrawn and intensely private. His one marriage collapsed in 1951 after just 2 years, his wife citing his emotional unavailability and lifelong secrets. He had no children. In his personal life, Culver was an eccentric loner. He collected antique buttons obsessively and was rumored to have written dozens of unpublished detective novels under a female pseudonym. His final years were spent traveling throughout Asia, reportedly seeking spiritual meaning, before falling ill in Hong Kong in 1984. He died on August 4, 1984, at the age of 66 from meningitis. At the time of his death, his assets included savings, overseas accounts, and a Los Angeles apartment, with an estate valued around $2 million. Glenn Strange, born August 16, 1899, stepped into the role of Sam Noonan on Gunsmoke in 1961 at the age of 62, portraying the unflappable bartender of the Long Branch Saloon. Towering and imposing, with a gravelly voice that made most men think twice before causing trouble, Strange's Noonan became a background anchor to Dodge City's chaos. But Glenn Strange's real story was far from the quiet dignity of his character. Born on a hardscrabble ranch in the New Mexico territory, Strange grew up with no electricity, surviving on beans, harsh labor, and the superstition-laced fear of a violent father. His Cherokee ancestry, which he rarely discussed, made him the target of mockery and discrimination as a child. In his teens, he drank heavily and boxed under fake names in backroom saloons to earn money. After years of B-movie roles, his breakout ironically came not in a Western, but as Frankenstein's monster, a role that both launched and cursed his career. The makeup left permanent skin damage, and Karloff's fans resented the imposter. That resentment lingered into Gunsmoke, where crew members privately mocked Strange's limited range, with one director reportedly calling him scenery with a heartbeat. His biggest career humiliation came in 1959, when a Universal press release listed him as unavailable due to health reasons. A polite cover for being quietly dropped after a string of drunken outbursts on set. Married to Minnie Thompson since 1937, the couple remained together, but their only daughter reportedly stopped speaking to him in the late 60s due to his harsh discipline and rumored infidelity during location shoots. By the early 1970s, Strange was quietly battling lung cancer, but continued to work, hiding his illness even as he coughed through takes. He died on September 20th, 1973, in Los Angeles at the age of 74. At the time of his death, his estate included rural land in New Mexico, royalties from Frankenstein merchandise, and savings from a frugal life, totaling an estimated $3 million. Clem Fuller, born July 6, 1908, in Los Angeles County, California, joined Gunsmoke in 1957 at age 49, portraying Clem the bartender and other unnamed townsfolk in 67 episodes until his death in 1961. His character, gruff, silent, and ever-present behind the saloon counter, offered a hard-edged charm that anchored many of Dodge City's more chaotic scenes. But the real Clem Fuller was a man forged by physical danger and personal loss. Born into a working-class family, he quit school at 13 to help his father repair saddles, later lying about his age to work as a rodeo hand. Fuller's path to Hollywood came through pain. He became a stuntman in the early 1930s, earning a reputation for dead falls, the dangerous act of hurling himself off a galloping horse and landing like a corpse. These stunts paid $25 each, but left him with a spine riddled with damage by the time he was 40. He transitioned to acting, always in the periphery, always wearing dust and bruises as his costume. Fuller was known for his temper, with several unrecorded incidents of on-set violence, once knocking out a fellow actor after a fight over screen time. He was also rumored to have an alcohol problem, reportedly bringing whiskey to shoots in a disguised water bottle. His marriage was rocky. His wife reportedly left him for a set decorator in 1959, and Fuller later lived alone in a cramped studio apartment in Hollywood, estranged from his 2 sons. Despite appearing in westerns with legends like Gary Cooper, he remained a background figure, always in frame, never in focus. He died of cancer on May 24, 1961, at the age of 52, collapsing in his apartment just days after a minor role in an unnamed pilot. At the time of his death, his estate was valued at under $1 million, much of it from decades of physical risk rather than fame. While his name never made headlines, the bruises on his body told the story of a man who quite literally gave everything for the illusion of the Wild West. Thank you for watching as we reflected on the lives and legacies of the actors from Gunsmoke who are no longer with us. Their humor, charm, and unforgettable performances brought joy to millions and helped shape the show into a classic. While their journeys ended far too soon, their impact lives on through every scene, every laugh, and every memory they've left behind. As we honor their lives, we're reminded of how deeply television can touch our hearts. Join us next time as we look back at more stars who left us too soon, but whose stories continue to shine.